Welcome to the Meria Show, the Internet's original podcast. Since the year 2000, always ahead of the curve, always on your side. A true warrior for truth and justice, Meria and her guests leave nothing out, and no one is off limits. There is only one truth, the rest is lies. Sit back, enjoy the education with a true daughter of Mother Earth. Sharp New York wit, spiritual knowing, and a very dry sense of humor, Meria will dissect the news and lies to make it all palatable. Education is power. Meria delivers rapid-fire truth like no one else can. Here she is, the mouth that roars, the legendary Meria Heller.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. Welcome to the show. I have a great guest for you today. You've probably seen her work or seen her somewhere for sure. Ellen Jaffe Jones. She is a motivational speaker, personal trainer, a running coach, an author. She's an instructor of healthy cooking classes. She was an investigative reporter and anchor for 18 years in major market TV news. She won 2 Emmys and the National Press Club Award. But one of the most important things is she has survived physical disease and more than anybody I have ever seen through the information we're going to talk about in her latest book, Vegan Fitness for Mortals. So I'm very happy to have Ellen with me today. Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for writing such an inspiring book. You know, I know my listeners know, but you don't. This is our first chat together. But I've been a vegan now for 17 years, and I work out. I've been doing that for many, many years, 6 days a week. And it's kept me very healthy. However, I must say, I certainly didn't have the family history of disease or personal history of disease that you did. I'd like to talk a little bit about your story.
Well, sure. I think it started when my aunt died of breast cancer in her home when I was 5, and that really had a traumatic effect on me. My mom and then both sisters would also go on to have breast cancer, and our family history was so well known because my sister was actually married to the lieutenant governor of Missouri. So we became part of the original breast cancer gene studies with Meria Genetics, and though none of us needed any study to tell us what we already knew, and that was that the gene was alive and well in our family. But the interesting thing was geneticists tell me now that probably only 2 of those cases were in fact genetic, that the other 2 were so late in life that they were environmentally caused.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, you know, I was reading through your book and I was like, okay, let's see what this book has in it. But I mean, I actually wrote the word wow in the column where you talked about almost at the beginning of the book. We grew up a block from the finest bakery in town, and now comes as no surprise, all of my family members had heart disease, diabetes, severe osteoporosis, crippling arthritis, and more. When you look at that and you hear so many people say, well, you know, if your parents had this disease, you have to have this disease. How do you respond today after healing yourself?
Well, I say that I didn't get all the good genes, and there is much we can do to turn our genes on and off. And I grew up in hospitals. We would joke that this particular family member's disease was the scene of our family reunion that particular year, or we pondered what wing of the hospital our family's diseases were causing. So, and that's the kind of thing where I just thought, as the youngest in my family, I grew up around all of that and thought there's got to be a better, easier, and certainly cheaper way. So I really began looking at this as the investigative reporting job of my life. And to this day, I am the only healthy adult female in my family of origin. And unfortunately, my mom and one of my sisters has already died. But, I just do this work because I have 3 daughters, and the genetic odds are 1 in the 4 of us gets breast cancer. And there really is a whole lot you can do. I almost died of a colon blockage when I was 28. I didn't know any of this information, ran to the health food store and read all 4 books on fiber because that's all there was at the time, and immediately changed my life and couldn't believe how much of a difference it made. The doctors in the ER said they'd package this large in somebody so young, and I would need to be on medicine the rest of my life.
Right.
Never needed to do that.
Well, that's great. That's superb. Many years ago, I became a vegan myself. And up till that point, I had been on thyroid medication for about a dozen years. 2 years into the diet change, my thyroid repaired itself, and I've been off medication for about 16 years now.
Awesome.
So, people don't want to make the connection between what they eat and exercise and their physical diseases. I will tell you this, though, Ellen, I was very happy to see two of my favorite doctors in your book. I've interviewed them several times on my show, Dr. Neil Barnard and Dr. John McDougal. I also saw you tossed in Colin Campbell, who I've also interviewed. And I believe their work is totally life-saving.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't know if you saw, just a couple days ago, I get so many emails and newsletters and connections to websites. I'm not sure which part of the pure or plant-based organization this was on, but it was an interview with Colin Campbell talking about how he agreed to do an interview with the BBC, and they totally put him in a false light of basically as part of this movement of people trying to make money off the ill health of others. And, my skin just crawled when I read it, because
Right.
as a TV investigative reporter, I have done those kinds of stories, and this group of doctors, they're such heroes. They've gone against conventional medicine. They've stood up to the pharmaceutical industry and make very little money, for the most part, following their hearts and this whole idea that medicine should be something that's positive for their patients. And I think we, as people who have benefited from the results of their courageous work and writings, have to be shouting it from the rooftops. I just placed this past weekend in my 110 5K races that I have done and placed in my age group since 2006, 110 times, just eating plants. That's it.
Right. Well, I know you like to use the expression a plant-based diet versus a vegan diet. Why is that?
Well, actually, I don't. I talk about it in the book, the difference between the two. And if you Google the words plant-based, the first thing that often pops up, because I've done this myself, is me. I was quoted in a Tampa Bay Times article in 2011 when my first book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, came out. And it said that, I was talking about how when I did cooking classes for Dr. Barnard's Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has sort of a subgroup called the Cancer Project. And I was a trained cooking instructor for them. And we were told then, it's probably better to use the word plant-based to include more people. They'll be more interested in it than using the word vegan, which at the time was really more associated with animal rights. I think so many of us have been out there, and my publisher has been very insistent on using the V word in my book titles, because vegan is very much now associated with good health, and people like me running around the country showing how you can save so much money, not only by making healthy choices at the store, which are very inexpensive, but also by avoiding doctors and disease.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about people making money off disease. Who could be making more money than our healthcare system and big pharmaceutical companies?
Bingo, nailed it.
You know what I mean? Years ago, I interviewed Kevin Trudeau, who unfortunately is rotting in prison because of his last book. And he made it very clear, how much money is being made on pharmaceuticals and how most of the food companies are owned by the diet companies, which are also owned by the pharmaceutical companies. So when people look at that, they have to understand that, they don't want to cure you. They want repeat customers.
Yeah, exactly. As I said in my first book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, there's no money in broccoli. And when you understand that there's no broccoli association, no company that makes it, no broccoli corporation or lobby or politicians on the take from them, then you have to be your own investigative reporter like I was to figure out the truth about food. And I actually got that line out of a great book that I read as a La Leche League leader, which is a volunteer breastfeeding information and support group where I was a trained leader and coordinator of leader applicants for the state of Missouri. This book talked about how there's no corporation that makes breast milk. And when you start to understand and connect all of these dots, then your head starts exploding as you realize that perhaps what you've been told, even by your doctor, who was probably trained in a pharmaceutically paid for hospital or hospital wing, is perhaps not in your best interest. And you have to look for other answers from credible sources. And this group of vegan doctors, it's not only Dr. Barnard and Dr. McDougal, but so many others out there now who are seeing incredible results, especially in the whole cardiac field. Amazing how much heart disease can be reversed almost instantaneously by adopting a vegan/plant-based diet.
Right. But, when I read in your book how your family was so close to a really good bakery, when I grew up in Brooklyn, and the ground floor of the building we lived in was probably the best pizza in the world. And right across the street was probably the best bakery in the world, Camareri's, which was in Moonstruck with Cher. So my entire family existed on fattening carbohydrates to the point that I would venture to say we were all carbohydrate addicts, eating all the wrong stuff. So we were all, we'll call it pleasingly plump, a little Oompa Loompa family. So it's really hard to break those habits.
Absolutely.
But I think it was years ago when, I think it was Dr. Barnard's book, Breaking the Food Seduction. He had sent that to me, and I read it, and I said, okay, I want to test this out to see if it works before I put him on my show, because I'm always careful about who I put out there, because my listeners trust me. So he had, I think he said it would take 6 or 12 weeks to change your eating pattern, or whatever your prime food was that you wanted to break away from. And Ellen, at that time, I was such a chocolate addict, I can't even put it into words, okay? And I said, okay, I'm going to try his eating, and as you know, it's high fiber vegetarian. And I was about 3 weeks in, and my girlfriend invited me to a party. And I went to this party, and there it was, staring me right in the face, the most beautiful chocolate fountain with the most gorgeous strawberries you ever saw in your life. So, of course, I just zeroed right in on it. I picked the biggest strawberry I could find, and I must have whipped it under that chocolate about 20 times. And then I go and I put it in my mouth, and I literally spit it out. And I was stunned. Needless to say, that chocolate addiction's been gone ever since, which is a long time ago. And it's proof positive. So the thing is, I'm not telling my audience to believe you or to believe these doctors. What I'm saying is, give it a try. What do you have to lose besides disease and extra pounds?
Exactly. And I lost about 25 pounds myself the last and final time I dieted. And I tried all the high protein diets, starting with Atkins several times, South Beach, the Zone diets and their variations. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote Paleo Vegan as my third book, because I just felt like my running friends were starting to go paleo, and I forced myself to read some of the meat-based paleo books. And it was just Atkins all over again, repackaged and a little cleaned up. And then National Geographic, about a year after that book came out, said, well, the paleo books that are on the market, the meat-based ones, are a stew of misconceptions, and it wasn't like a wild boar was running around our backyards anyway, that we could catch it easily and then eat it and not get sick and die. So, all these fad diets, which is what they are, really don't work in the long term for a lot of people. You have to find a consistent way of eating that makes you feel satisfied. And the great thing about a plant-based vegan diet is that it includes all colors of the rainbow, and these foods are meant to appeal to our mind's eye. And you're right, once you do clean up your diet and get rid of the processed junk, and that's one of the reasons that the paleo diet is somewhat successful, is because just by default, getting rid of processed foods, a lot of people do improve and their taste buds change. So, but going the extra step to avoid the whole thing that happens with animals and slaughterhouses, and just from an animal rights perspective, which does affect emotional health. Once you see some of these videos and you realize what's happening to these poor animals, you realize, well, I can't even pay somebody else to do what I'm not prepared to do.
Exactly. Well, for me, that was the turning point. I had put it off as long as I could. I came up with the same excuses everybody else has. And then I read John Robbins' book on the food revolution, and I couldn't justify eating animal products anymore. So, reading is a wonderful way to improve your life in so many ways. And I agree with what you said, that it does affect you mentally. I think it affects you spiritually as well.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the other things you quoted in there, which was so cute, I was like, wow, I can really relate to her. You listed the Moosewood Cookbook by Molly Katzen. And the reason that caught my eye and I got a kick out of it was the first couple of months that I went vegan, one of my friends who was a cook, she bought me that book to encourage me. And at that time, of course, I had no idea how famous that book was or how delicious the recipes were either.
Yeah.
Now, are you still running? Because I know, you what did you say, 110 runs you've done already?
Well, no, that's just 110 races that I've placed in. I've probably run in at least twice that many, because I don't always place in my age group. It's hard to do. And it depends how big the race is as well. And those are just 5Ks and half marathons that I'm talking about. Because I was running with our local running club, and one of the members happened to be the coach of our high school girls track team. This was about 10 years ago, and she saw that I was clocking 8-minute miles and keeping up with the kids, and she goes, "Do you want to be like my assistant coach?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, fine, why not?" So this was before any of my books came out, and I had a lot more time than I do now. So every day after school, I would drive 20 miles to the high school and be her assistant volunteer coach. And as a result of doing track work, I realized that I could compete at the local national senior games, and I did well enough there. I qualified for state, and then I did so well in the state of Florida that I qualified for nationals. And 4 years ago, I placed 7th in the U.S. in the 1,500 meters, 10th in the 400, 16th in the 200, and 19th in the 100. And then the following year, I placed first in Florida in everything in my age group, from the 50 meters, well, it's 50, 100, 200, 400, 800, and 1,500 meters. And that qualified me to go to nationals again, but instead I spoke at a national event, the North American Vegetarian Summerfest, which is like summer camp for vegans. You should so do it. Very fun.
Uh-huh.
And then just this last year, the National Senior Games only happen every other year. So last year, you can spend the whole year trying to qualify, and I did that again, placing first in Florida in the 800 and 1,500 meters, as well as for the first time I did a relay race, and our team placed first in that. So all of that qualified me to go to nationals again this coming summer, and I'll let you know how that goes.
That's great, but you're telling me that you're competing in the senior category.
Right.
Because
so
I want my listeners to know that I'm not talking to somebody who's 22 years old.
Yeah, no, I'm 64, and people come up to me all the time and ask to see my driver's license, or they'll just do a double take.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it happens every day. I was getting gas this morning, for crying out loud, and I have what I call the vegan mobile. Every one of my books has a huge magnet on my car, and so people at gas stations, will stop me and go, and this woman did, she was filling up with gas across from me, and she goes, "Are you a coach?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, could you come talk at my church?" And so it turns out we're exactly the same age, and she was just in denial that I was 64, and that's the thing, people want to know, well, what do I do to look like you at that age? And
right.
When I say a plant-based diet and running are magical, I am as sincere as I can possibly be, because I could never imagine feeling this good 20 or 40 years ago. I thought I was going to just get all the diseases my family members had, and there was no way out of it.
Right. Well, I can totally relate, because I'm a few years older than you. And, I go to the gym 6 days a week. And it was funny, because the owner came up to me a few weeks ago and he said, "What motivates you?" And I said, "Looking at my peers." And the truth of the matter is, even though you're going to look better, I think what's more important is that you feel better. You have flexibility, you have strength, you have power, which a lot of people in their 60s don't. They can barely open up their medicine.
Right. I was whining about something to my personal trainer, and I've hired a former Navy SEAL to get me ready for the National Senior Games this year. And he goes, Ellen, cut it out. You are in the top at least 5% of women your age in terms of your fitness. So I just don't want to hear it, and get back to doing your dips.
Well, I was working with a trainer about a year ago, and you know how they have to test you before they work with you.
Right.
And when he tested me, he says, you test like an athlete. He said of about, if I look at it, and he showed me all the measurements and stuff, which I really didn't understand. But he said that I was equal to somebody 26 years old.
Yeah, and it is interesting. They can measure all that. As part of the National Senior Games, we had to fill out a survey after the games were over, and they sent back the results to me saying, you have the chronological age of a 62-year-old, but you have the fitness age of a 26-year-old. And the same thing happened. I have mitral valve prolapse, which is not a huge deal unless your valve starts leaking tremendously and you have symptoms from it, which I don't. But I check in with a cardiologist, and they do, to make sure the blood is flowing fine, they do an echocardiogram. And after that, it measures how well your heart is pumping, and they have what's called a heart ejection factor. And he said, you have the heart ejection factor of a 21-year-old, go out and run.
Wow, that's superb. Well, reading some of the statistics in your book was pretty scary. And not that it's that new, but every now and then it's like review to me, and I go into shock all over again. But you had some statistic in there on obesity and disease saying that 42 million kids under 5 are overweight. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And I just watch what people put in their carts at the grocery store or other places I shop. And it's like you just want to run up to people and say, hey, there's a great deal on beans 2 aisles over. Why didn't you follow me? But I don't do that. And especially living here in Florida, I spend a fair amount of time at the beach getting my vitamin D, and I'm just blown away by what I see. And those are the people who at least have the courage and guts to even come out to the beach. And again, it's just a sorry and sad state of affairs that we have as a culture let ourselves go. And part of it is the electronics that keep us glued in front of our computers and monitors, and I'm as guilty as the next person. And one of the more staggering pieces of information that I talk about in the book is how you can run for 60 minutes in the morning. Solid running, not even walking, just running. And if you sit the rest of the day at the computer, you've totally negated that 1 hour of running in the morning.
Mm. Well, but in today's world, it's hard to do that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I try to remind myself to get up, get off the computer, do some stretching, walk around a little bit.
I recently succumbed because I feel like I have to be an expert at all things technical and gadgetry. Uh-huh. So I bought an Apple Watch, and many of the watches now in the market, Garmin has the same, but the Apple Watch seems to be a little bit easier to see in terms of the readout and where it takes you. But all of these GPS watches now have activity monitors built into them, so they can vibrate once every hour or whatever time frame you set on it to make sure that you actually get up and stand. The Apple Watch actually has a standing feature. They want you to stand 2 minutes every hour of 10 to 12 hours a day. And so it lets you know when you've reached those goals or how much more you have to do before you reach your goal. But certainly, 10,000 steps, we've all heard that. But for some people, maybe less than that is a more appropriate goal based on where they are and what they're doing in their life. But it's just important to get a handle on some of this and figure out what it is you need to do to ramp up your numbers and the activity, because it does. It's like, as I say in the book, sitting is the new smoking.
Right. It really is crippling. So I try to get up and move around, throw some laundry in, whatever it is, just to be conscious to do that, because it's very easy to sit in front of your computer and then the next time you turn around, it's like 4 hours have passed.
Exactly.
Right. Now, you also had a figure in the book. 78 million people in the United States have high blood pressure. I would assume a
Right.
lot of that is not just lack of exercise, but also what they're eating.
Oh, absolutely. Especially processed foods, one of the things that keeps them preserved is sodium or salt. And so, depending what you're used to, you may not even be aware that you are consuming these kinds of foods that are so high in salt. And again, once you taper back and start eating foods in their natural state, then you will be surprised if you bite into something and it's highly salted. It's kind of like sugar. You develop your taste buds in a way that you get used to not having it in your diet. Not that you shouldn't have any sweetness or salt in your diet. That's not what I would suggest.
Right.
But we are so accustomed to eating way, way, way too much of it, and it does have all these other health ramifications.
Right. I'm sure you've noticed there's a lot of vegan products on the market that I would love to buy, but when I look at the contents, the sodium is off the charts, so I just stick it right back where it was.
Right. Just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. You're absolutely right.
Oh, yeah. So now, okay, we're not telling our listeners, please don't, if you're still with us, we're not telling you to get up and start running 5 miles a day. Okay, especially if you've been sedentary most of your life. But I think it's important to set some kind of a goal. So would you suggest people just start out with something simple like walking?
Yes, absolutely. And it just depends. You would laugh. People come up to me at a race and say, well, you think I could do a marathon next year? And I go, have you done a half marathon? Have you done a 5K? What exactly have you done? And so everybody's starting point is different. But generally speaking, walking is a great way to start, and then you can gradually increase the ratio of walking to running. But if you were going to start a running program, no more than 15 to 30 seconds at the get-go every 4 or 5 minutes just for starters, and see how that goes. And it's also very important to get properly fitted for shoes, especially if you're running on hard surfaces like concrete. Concrete was invented only about 100 years ago. So we're really designed to run on softer, more natural surfaces. At the National Senior Games 4 years ago, the big mantra was get off the track. The track, which is usually asphalt, or even now they've come into making some of them, although this is rare, out of rubber, and that's good. But the asphalt tracks even are not considered natural surfaces. So they suggested going to like a soccer field or a baseball field where the grass is really short, and you can kind of see where you're running, and set your Garmin or your GPS watch to kilometers. Take it off of the mile reading, and then change it to kilometers, so you can just basically run the same distance as you would on a track, but on a softer surface. So that's just one idea. I mean, this whole idea of and this applies to foods too, what did Mother Nature intend? What did our ancestors really do? I encourage my clients to always ask those questions.
Right. Well, back in the day, when I was a kid, gyms didn't exist.
Right.
And, I try to explain to people, everybody got their exercise just getting through the day. Gathering their food, going shopping, up and down stairs. There were no computers. There was no Amazon to buy your stuff at. People were in motion. My grandparents were in motion all the time. My father was in motion all the time. He never worried about diet. But he was a very healthy eater for the times, and he was very aware. But we've become so sedentary as a nation, probably as a world, that we now have to, it's kind of, I'm sure you've seen that joke where people have to drive to get to the gym. So it's a whole different world now. And I'm not saying everybody has to go to a gym. So I had a question for you, and I'm sure you can answer it. When somebody starts walking or they start running, does it matter how fast they go, or should they just do it for time?
It's totally about time, I think, because your speed will improve over time anyway. But the biggest part of sticking with the program is just putting it on your calendar like a doctor's appointment and really not wavering from that as much as you can possibly stick with the program. Because your body will really start to appreciate and get used to the level of fitness, whatever it is you achieve. And even if you decide you never want to run, I mean, I hear this a lot, oh, my knees, oh, my feet, I have these issues. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that can be corrected through proper shoes or orthotics inserts that are put inside. I know I could not have run a day past my 29th birthday had I not been fitted for orthotics. And they were pretty primitive by today's standards. Back in those days, they were made out of cork. Mm-hmm. And now, they have these wonderful molds they can take of your feet, and they're all different kinds of materials that range from over-the-counter, very soft products like Atrix, or the more custom ones that a podiatrist would have to take an impression of your foot and then send it off somewhere to get it made. So it's whatever works. The idea is that some of us have biomechanical imbalances, especially women. If we've had kids, our hips expand from the hormone called relaxin, which makes us able to give birth to our children, but it also makes our hips even wider than when we started out before kids. So that can exert pressure on the knees and makes the arches collapse and set up a whole chain reaction there that can be corrected by an insert. Now, personal trainers and physical therapists, many of them subscribe to the theory that these imbalances can be corrected with proper exercises for your quadriceps, which support the knee, and your back as well, having a strong core, doing ankle exercises, resistance bands with your ankle, fighting the resistance bands. Those kinds of things can strengthen your feet and possibly correct those imbalances. Personally, I think it may take, at least for me, a lot of work to reach that point. The orthotics still do the trick for me.
Well, that's great. Well, we'll talk a little bit when we get back about the benefits of yoga and how you can get rid of a lot of those aches and pains just with yoga. So stay with us. Ellen and I will be right back. Hi, Meria here, and I have a message due to the pressure of the times we're living in. I'm calling on all students and millennials to get the education they need to fight the fascism taking over our world. I've made a special subscription offer for students and for seniors on a limited budget. For just $9.99 a month, you can subscribe and get that education. Over 500 hours of real education that's necessary to understand the world, the problems, and the solutions. Remember, knowledge is power. Together, you can change the world, but to do so, you must be informed of what's really going on and have real facts to support you in your endeavors. It's time for all the grandmothers to take a stand and teach the younger generation what their life could be and how to get there. Help me help you. One person cannot do it alone, and the guidance you seek is right here at www.meria.net, meria.net. Your generation is the generation we've been waiting for, so let me help you. Thanks for listening. Hi, this is Maria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to meria.net, meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you and help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.